We're here on Daf Gimel, correct? And which paragraph did we get up to? We started Tfilas Niddah, and we started Takanas Rebbe. Let's go over Takanas Rebbe a little bit as a chazara. We have major machlokus rishonim about Takanas Rebbe, which is on the bottom of the right column, going on to the top of the left column. First, we have the sheet of Rashi. Rashi holds the following: that according to Takanas Rebbe, when she saw one day, then obviously she becomes Tmeya for 7 days. And that includes the day that she saw. So what does that mean? We're worried about the possibility, even if we don't think that that's so, that her Riyah was during Yemei Niddah. Theoretically, it could have been during Yemei Ziva, but Rebbe is going to say, you know what? We're not going to consider anything definite. We're not going to say, you know, she had this Riyah during Yemei Ziva, and therefore she's a Shomer Yom Keneged Yom, and she needs 3 Riyahs on 3 consecutive days. Forget about that. We're going to assume in the eyes of what's called the Amsha B'Sados, there's total confusion. So there's a possibility that what we think is Yemei Ziva is really Yemei Niddah, and therefore she has to count 7 full days. Now, if she sees 2 days in a row, then we have another chashash that maybe the first of her 2 days was during Yemei Ziva. The second of the days is during Yemei Niddah. So she's going to have to count 1 day of Ziva and then a full 7 days of Niddah for the total of 8 days. If she sees 3 days in a row, then she needs Zayin Nikiyim, even though she's convinced, and all evidence seems to indicate that she's during Yemei Niddah. We're going to always raise that suffix that maybe she is during Yemei Ziva, and therefore she saw 3 days consecutively, she becomes a suffix. That's Rashi's interpretation of Rebbe. Now we get to the Rashba and all the other, and apparently all the other Rishonim. She saw 2 days consecutive. Right? It means that she cannot be a Zava by definition. She only had 2 Re'iyos on 2 different days. So that without Rebbe, we would have said there's no need for Nikiyah. Right? You could have a Chumrah, let's say, and start counting the 7 days of Niddah, starting with the second day and the second Riyah. But to require Nikiyah, that's out of the question, because she only had 2 Re'iyos. So let's read it inside. It's the last line on the right column. He says, Afim Rasa Yom Echad Ushnayim Tzricha Lispar Shisha Yomim Nikiyim V'Yimtira Dam B'Yom B'Yimei Ashisha, during any of those 6 days, Harehi B'Safek Shere'iyah Zu B'Mei Niddah V'Harehi Tmea Shuv Shivas Yomim. So first and foremost, if during the 6-day period she saw it down, we have to consider the possibility that she is in Niddah now, and she's going to have to start counting 7 days from that Re'iyah. So even though she had 2 Re'iyos beforehand, those 2 Re'iyos belong to, let's say, Yemei Ziva. The third Re'iyah belongs to Yemei Niddah. She needs 7 days. But you're still not out in the clear. Yesh lachush shetir b'mei nidas adam she'ena min amaros hatmeos v'titamenu mishum she'enon b'kiyim b'maros hadomim harei hisvur she'achshav maskilim yemei nidusa u'be'emes dam tarhu v'adayin lo ischilu yemei nidusa. Yesh lachush etira b'yom hashishi dam tomeh. The heat smura she'ena tzricha lahamtin od shiva shekvar schilu yemei nidasa b'yom harishon l'riyasa ubemes eno kain el tchilas yemei nidasa b'yom hashishi arei bali deikos. You follow that? I didn't. Let's take it from the top. This is where we got up to yesterday. Sharishon. Afim rasa yom echad ushnayim. Tzricha lispar shisha yomim nikim. Because we have to be absolutely certain that she has no re'iyas dam during the next 6 days. Why? She'im tiradam b'yom mimei shisha. If she doesn't have nikiyim, and in one of those 6 days she sees dam, harehi b'sofek. What's the suffix now? It's possible that this re'iyah is during Yemei Niddah. And I'm assuming, I hope I'm not wrong here, that the first 2 re'iyahs were during Yemei Ziva. I don't know, he doesn't spell that out. Harei Tmeya Shuv Shivas Yomim. Harei Tmeya Shuv Shivas Yomim. That would have to be because the years were during Ziva. Okay, he just tells you in the Chaf Ches that this is the Rajba. Hitmeya Shuv Shivas Yomim. Let's go back again to Rashi. Yomim. Hitmeya Ishlochu Sharias Hayom Rishon B'mei Ziva Asov Hasheni B'mei Nidasa. Therefore, we have to begin counting the 7 days of Nidus from the 2nd day of Re'iyah. And you have the first day of Re'iyah, you add that to 7, you have 8 days of Tumah. Now we get to the Rashba. The Rashba is saying that if she saw 2 days of Re'iyah, she needs Zayin Im Tiradam. This, then it could very well be that this dam that she saw is during Yemei Niddah, and if it's during Yemei Niddah, then she needs Shivas Yom. I don't understand why that would be against Rashi. What's the objection to Rashi? Maybe it comes later in the V'chein, but just before we get to the V'chein, so far it sounds exactly like Rashi. No?
When Rashi said the 2nd day was Dam Niddah.
Yeah, but what would Rashi say if she saw another Re'iyah in the next sometime during the next 6 days? I mean, Rashi would also have to admit that there's a very compelling, logical possibility that the first 2 Re'iyahs belong to Ziva. Because, I mean, you see here in the presentation of Rashi, that Rashi, in the case where there are 2 days of consecutive Re'iyah, he says the first day belongs to Ziva, maybe the 2nd day to Niddah. So you see that Rashi is operating with this suffix that we never know on any particular Re'iyah whether it belongs to Yemei Ziva or Yemei Niddah. So I don't see, at this point, if I would, stop here and put a self pasuk here, I don't see that that's against Rashi.
Well,
because if she sees in any of those 6 days, it's very possible that's the beginning of her nidus, no? Well, what am I missing here? Maybe
I thought that previously that we know that first when she has her when she did that, then we know that that's what the Shiva is serving. So how exactly have the Zaba or how you say that the first day is the Zaba and the 2nd day?
well, no, let's say her previous niddah period ended minus 11 days, if you find 11 days ago. So if she finished that Niddah period 11 days ago, these are the 11 days of Siva. So it's quite possible that if we had a chart with her previous Niddah and this Niddah, when she sees Dam now, it could be that that Dam belongs to Siva because 11 days have passed since her previous Niddah. And basically what we're saying, according to Rebbe, is that the Amstel Besados are totally confused. They don't know, how to keep the calendar and make sure these are the Yemei Ziva and these Yemei Niddah. And the truth is, I think it's the Rambam sheet, if I remember correctly, that we go back to the first time she saw Dam. She could have been a baby of a half a year old and she saw Dam Nidus, an infant. And that begins Nidus, that goes 7 and then finishes Nidus, and you go into 11, you may see, but it goes, the whole life is all set in motion, in stone, by the very first. But again, I'm just trying to dramatize that it's very complicated. And that's where Rebbe's Takana comes in to figure out where is Yemei Ziva, and Yemei Niddah. So therefore, if we're always raising the possibility that, let's say, her first Riyah belongs to Ziva and her second Riyah on the next day belongs to Niddah, so we have to get a full 7 days after the second Riyah. And if that be the case, then according to Rashi, and I don't see where the Rashi is objecting to Rashi, if she sees 2 consecutive days of Riyah, then those 2 days might be Yemei Ziva. It could be that there's no machlokas. It's just a question of what Rebbe, they're just trying to figure out what scenario Rebbe had in mind when he made his takana. I don't know, but let's see v'chein, maybe.
It's not the difference between 7 and 6. New Rashi holds 7 days and yours.
Again, 6 days from day 2
days
is basically 7 days. Because if she has any Riyah during that 6-day period, that might be the inception of her Niddah period.
Rashi is 7 days from day 2.
Well, I don't know what you mean by 7 including day 2. Why are you excluding day 2? Day 2 is the day that you became a Niddah.
Right.
So you add another 6 days. That's 7. I think. I don't know. I don't see why you. Again, she had a Riyah before that one, so then it jacks up the number to 8. So she sees on Sunday and Tuesday, Sunday belongs to Ziva and Monday belongs to Niddah. She's going to have to count another 6 days after Monday, which is a total of 8 days. Meaning that Tuesday becomes the first of the 6 days, add that to the previous 2 days of Sunday and Monday, and you end up with 8 days. But I don't see where the Rash, by the way he's quoting it, is disagreeing. And that's why I'm suggesting that maybe there's no machlokas. It's just it's like a conceptual machlokas. It's not an actual machlokas. Meaning, what scenario was Rebbe concerned with? So Rashi is emphasizing that we never know in any case of Riyah whether it belongs to Ziva or it belongs to Niddah. So, for example, Rashi would say, if she saw 3 consecutive days, even though we have every reason to assume it's during Yemei Nidus, we have to consider that maybe it's during Yemei Ziva, and therefore she's going to have 7 Zayin Nikiyim. That's where we're choshesh that she became a Zava Gedolah. There's another chashash, says Rashi, that maybe she became a Zava Ketana. Now, why is that a chashash? Why is that a chumrah? The chumrah of Zava Ketana would be that if her Riyah on days, like she saw 2 days consecutive, that means Sunday and Monday, now we have to consider the possibility that her Riyah of Sunday is a Riyah Ziva, making her into a Zava Ketana, and she only became a Niddah with the second Riyah of Monday. The Rashba is throwing in a new terminology, a new concept, meaning that she needs 6 days of Nikiyim, but we shouldn't confuse that. The 6 days of Nikiyim only means that we don't know whether her next Riyah is within the Niddah period or it's the initiation of the Niddah period. And therefore, if she doesn't get Naki, whenever she sees during that 6-day period, we're going to have to jumpstart a whole new Niddah period. But I think, although I don't know, he doesn't spell it out, that that's all based on the Ashash. Maybe the first two Re'iyos were Re'iyos Ziva. But again, let's read the V'chein, because maybe that'll shed a light on it. V'chein yesh lochush. Now here we're entering into another dimension of this whole issue, that she might have seen a re'iyah and assumed that it was Niddah when it wasn't Niddah at all. It was Dam Tar. V'chein yesh lochush. Shetira b'yemei dasa. Dam she'ena min amaras hatmeos, and because of her lack of knowledge, she's going to assume it was dam tameh. Oh, so what's so terrible about that? Arehi svura achshav maschilin yemeni dusa. Okay, so what's so tragic here? Ish lachush shetira biyom hashishi dam tameh smura she'ena tzrich lahamtin od shiva shekvar hischilu yemei nidasa biyom harishon l'riyasa. Very boldly they currents. So again, she's going to think mistakenly that she's already in the parsha of Niddah, right? She's already Tmei Niddah, and any re'iyah that she sees within that 7-day period is a re'iyah Niddah. And basically, let's say she sees on day 6. Right, so then tomorrow is day 7, and she finishes on Niddah's period Lishi Tasa, according to our understanding, tomorrow, when in truth, today is the first of the days of Niddah. Well, so how does she solve that problem? So let's say she counts 6 days of Nikiyah. So then Mimarashach, she's mutter. If the first Re'iyah on day 1 was not a Mara Tmeya, so then she's Tahora. And if on the other hand it was a Mara Tmeya, so that's day 1 of her Nidus, she has another 6 days, she can go to Mikvah. But the Chiddush here is that if she doesn't get 6 days of Nikiyah, then any dam that she sees, which she believes is within the framework of Hanidus, is really the beginning of Hanidus, because the original dam that she saw 5 days ago, whenever it was not really dam. So let's go over that one more time. According to the way we understood the Rashba, the reason why she needs Zayin Nikiyim, Vav Nikiyim, is because it's quite possible that any dam that she sees within that 6 days might be the initiation of Nidus, because the first 2 Re'iyos was Ziva. Now we're saying that the first 2 Re'iyos were not Re'iyos at all. And that's why this dam that she sees during the 6 days is going to kick off her Niddah period. So it seems to me, again, this is all, just shooting from the hip, that there's no nafkamina here. Everybody's coming to the same halachic conclusions, whether it's Rashi, whether it's the Rashba, or whether it's Chavtes, the Rosh. They're all coming to the same conclusion, but there are different conceptual hashoshos here to explain Rebbe. Rashi's conceptual hashosha was that she can't start counting Yemei Nidus when there's a possibility that that first Riyah belonged to Ziva. And furthermore, Rashi says if she sees 3 days consecutively and she thinks it's all during Niddah, we have to assume no, it's during Ziva and she becomes a Zavagdol. The Rashba is saying, again, conceptually, it sounds a little different than Rashi, but it's not a nafkamina la'alocha. He's just pointing out the Rashi that in effect, Bashetach, what we need Lamaisa is 6 days of Nikir. And the Rashba and the Rosh are going to give 2 different explanations for why we need 6 Nikir. The Rashba is saying we need 6 Nikir. Why? Because the way we interpreted the Rashba could be that she would mistakenly identify any Re'iyah during those 6 days as a Re'iyas Niddah, when in fact, just 1 second, let me get it again. According to the Rashba, what's going to happen here? If she sees during any of these days, that could be the beginning of Hanidut, she needs 7 days. But he doesn't tell you what the chashash was. So again, I think it comes back to what we said before, that the chashash is that she might think that Riyah during the 6 days is not the initiation of Nidus, or rather it's within the 7 days of Nidus, but we have to be conscious that her original Riyah and even 2 Riyahs consecutively were during Yemei Ziva. Now we have the Rosh. If we don't have the 6 Nikiyim, then she might be tar and think that she's Tameh, meaning the mistake was in interpreting the first Riyah, which was not a Riyah of Maros Atmeos, but she thought it was. And now when she sees during the 6 days, she assumes that's part of Hanidus. And then we get to Chumas Rabbi Zeir. This Rabbi Zeir, I think, is the most famous piece in the Masechet thing. Misharabu Agoliot v'Tokfu Atzaros Nismatu Alavov Zechmiru v'Nos Yisrael Atzman Shefilu Rasa Isha Tipas Dam Achas Keshev Olav Zayin Akivim Kizavagdol. This is amazing, almost. The woman saw Tipas Dam Kechad. How could she have possibly seen 3 consecutive days of Re'iyah? Watch me, Rabbi Osai. If, let's say, you want to really be a super machmir, let's say she saw that dam bein hashmoshes. And then I could say, well, maybe that dam belongs to yesterday, maybe belongs to today. Is it yesterday's dam or today's dam? Because bein hashmoshes is safek yom, safek layla. And even if I grant you that would possibly generate 2 days of Ziva, it can't possibly generate 3 days of Ziva. So how could she be mach? How could we require that she sit Zayin Nikiyim as a Zavagdol? And again, we're not talking about stupidity. You follow what I'm saying? We're not saying B'nos Yisrael Echmir Alatzman, crazy chumrah. Oh. She'af b'tipas dam, 1 little drop of dam, he nase Zavagdol. How? Oh, I hope he spells it out for us. Tipas dam. Oh, Ketzad. Hopefully, let's see the Ketzad. Rasa tipas dam. Yom miyamei shiva nekiyim lizivas harei sasra minyan utsricha limnos shuv shivas yemei nekiyim. Okay. So again, we're worried that maybe this tipas dam would be confused with a re'iyah soseres. In other words, within the constellation of Dam, there is a possibility that Tipas Dam would require Zayin Nekiv. When? In a case of a Zava who is now counting Zayin Nekiv, if she sees one Tipas Dam, that is Soseres, and she has to start the Zayin Nekiv all over again. Therefore, every time a woman sees Tipas Dam Kechado, she's going to treat it like that scenario where she saw it during Zayin Nekiv, she's going to have to count Zayin Nekiv. That's Akofa Al. Now he gets to Akofa Beis. Another reason why B'nos Yisrael Echmir Al Atzman Zayin Nekiv for Tipas Dam Kechado. V'chein Yesh Lachush Rasa Shnei Yomim V'mei Zivasa V'lo Nasno Libo Lekach. So we're saying now that when she sees Dam, she doesn't realize that this is the third Re'iyah. She didn't pay attention to the first two Re'iyos on the previous 2 days. She only saw one Re'iyah. She doesn't know about the first two Re'iyos on the previous 2 days. Ela harei ze yom shlishi l'riyasa utzricha limnos shiva nekir. Lamed Beis, Rashi. Why is this in Megillah? I guess the Halacha of Reb Zeir is quoted in Megillah. Daf. What does it say? Chav Ches? Where are we up to? Oh, we didn't get up to Chav Ches. Okay. So let's just summarize what we saw here in the Chumrah of Rabbi Zeir. One possibility is that there is a reality in the halachic universe where a Tipas Dam generates Zayin Nekiv, and that's called a Re'iyah Soseres. The other possibility is that she did not pay attention and realized that she had seen 2 Re'iyos on the 2 previous days. She thinks this is her first Re'iyah, when really this is a third Re'iyah, and she becomes a Zava Gedol. Is there anything else? Well, that's it. Don't show us a Tipas not wrong. Shivas, right? Every Sasa Minyana Tzichan. That's all. I only see 2. Maybe I'm thinking of the Gemara. If the Gemara has a Havamina that she could have had 3 Re'iyos. I don't know, I'm not sure. Maybe we just hop around the next paragraph. A Ramam Kosav, Bimei Chachmei HaGemara Nistapek HaDovar Harvei V'Re'iyas Domim Niskalkelu Avestos V'Fi Shelo Haya Koach B'Chol HaNoshim Limnos Yemei Niddah V'Yemei Ziva. Okay, that's what we touched on earlier. Is Lefichach Echmiru Chachamim B'Davar Zeh V'Gazru Sh'iu Kol Yemei Ha'isha Kimei Ziva V'Yeh Kol Adam Sh'Teret Sofik Dam Ziva. Okay, let's make a note of where we got up to. All right. So that's what we want to do here in Masechet Niddah. And on Sunday, with Hashem, we'll continue here. Now, we sent you, David, the pages, so you're okay, right? All right, good. Getting really sophisticated here with scanning and emailing. Thanks to Steve here. Okay.